sing this out together. I needed rescue, my sin was heavy. Chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan. You called me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open. 'Cause when you call my name, I ran out of that grave. Out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave. Out of the darkness, into your glorious day. Yeah. Coming on the clouds, kings and kingdoms will bow down. Every chain will break, His broken hearts declare His praise. But who can stop the Lord Almighty? Our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles. Every knee will bow before Him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains. Every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Every knee will bow before Him. So open up the gates. So open up the gates. Make way before the King of Kings. The God who comes to save is here to set the captives free. For who can stop the Lord Almighty? Our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles. Every knee will bow before Him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains. Every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Every knee will bow before Him. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? 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 There is no one who can stop the Lord Almighty. He is for you. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Come on! Who can stop the Lord?
Let the king of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, he is my song. Let the king of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, he is my song. 'Cause you are good, you're good. 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 Let the king of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my soul. Let the king of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the anchor of my days. Oh, he is my song. 'Cause you are good, you're good. You are good, you're good. Yes, you are good, you're good. You are good, you're good. You're never gonna let me down. 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 'Cause you are good, you're good. Yes, you are good, you're good. You are good, you're good. God, you are good, you're Flatirons. So good to be in this room together today and declare that truth together. Thank you for being here. We love you guys so much. Take a second, say hi to the people around you, welcome them here today, and then you can go ahead and take your seats.
When everyone you thought you knew deserts your fight, I'll go with you. You're facing down the dark hall I'll grab my light and go with you. I'll 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 go with you. Surrounded and up against a wall, I'll shred them all and go with you. When choices end, you must defend. I'll grab my bat and go with you. I'll go with you. I'll go with you. I'll go with you. Yeah. Stay with me, yeah. You don't need to run. Stay with me, my blood. You don't need to run. Stay with me, yeah. You don't need to run. Stay with me, my blood. You don't need to run. If there comes a day, people posted up at the end of your driveway, they're coming for your head and they're calling for your name. I bomb down on them, I'm coming through. Do they know I was grown with you? They hear the smoke, no, I'll go with you. Just keep it outside, yeah. Stay with me, yeah. You don't need to run. Stay with me, my blood. You don't need to run. Stay with me, yeah. You don't need to run. Stay with me, my blood. You don't need to run. 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 If you find yourself lying stand, I'll jump right in and pull my pin. Go with you, I'll 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 go with you, my blood, I'll go with you, yeah. Stay with me, you don't need to run. Stay with me, my blood, you don't need to run. Stay with me, you don't need to run. Stay with me, my blood, you don't need to run. 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 Stay with me, no. You don't need to run. Stay with me, my blood.
Hey everybody, welcome to Flatirons. Really glad you're here this weekend. Obviously I'm not, still on Christmas vacation, but I do have some announcements for you before we go on with the rest of the service today. First of all, I want to bring you up to speed on this amazing thing that happened during December here at Flatirons, and that is we introduced this new ministry, this new partnership really, called God Behind Bars, and we kind of threw out a vision and you all responded like nothing. I announced on Christmas Eve weekend that number was like $501,000, which is the largest like single gift we've ever given to anybody. But over the last month, actually the last 2 weeks, you've surpassed that, and that number is over $580,000 now. And so we just can't wait to get rolling with them. We're talking to God Behind Bars right now, and in the next few weeks we will give you more specific information about how we can all, and you, I've got a lot of interest from you about you getting involved specifically with volunteering and helping out with this awesome ministry. Second thing is this past fall we launched groups like we've never launched groups here before, and almost 5,000 of you signed up to meet on weekly or every other week to get together and unpack what God's teaching you individually or as a group. If you are interested in possibly leading a group this coming semester, be sure and be here next weekend, because in all of our lobbies at all of our campuses, there'll be some representatives out there that can give you instructions and information about how you can plug in on becoming a group leader. Now, if you missed out on getting in a group last semester, then towards the end of January, we're going to open up all those groups to new membership. And so now would be the time for you individually or as a family to jump in on a group. The third thing I want to talk to you about is next weekend we kick off this thing I'm really excited about. Around here we just call it a man series, where we are going to take 6 weeks over January and February to really run after the hearts of men. Men, husbands, fathers, married, single. Someday I hope I'm, one or the other, whatever that is. But we're going to try to figure out, not according to Flatirons, not according to culture, not according to the latest politically correctness. We're not going to do that. But we are going to go back to God's Word and go, what does it mean to be a man, a husband, a father, either now or in my future? So I really, really encourage you to be there for that. It's always one of the highlights of the year whenever we run after this. The other thing I'm really excited about is this weekend, while I'm not at any of the campuses, all of our campus pastors over the last couple of years have really kind of risen up and really stepped into their own, not just as leaders and leading staff and volunteers and things like that, but we have some amazing young teachers here on this staff. And so we carved out this first weekend of the year to give them a chance to come up here, kind of segue between what we've been learning out of this Sermon on the Mount before we go into this man series, and kind of they're all going to be kind of unpacking this idea of, what God's been teaching me over the last several months or years of my life. I really have to rethink some major areas of my life. And that goes in a lot of different directions for each one of them. I've read every one of their manuscripts, their sermons, and you are in for a huge treat. And so I just want you to take a minute right now and just welcome your campus pastor to the stage.
Hello, thank you. How are you? Happy New Year. I'm glad to see you guys here. I missed you guys last week. I was at the Broncos game, and it always feels super weird not to be working on a Sunday, but I had such a great time. I don't know if the Broncos fans had as good of a time, but it was a good time for me. So I'm glad you're here. Like Jim said, my name's Zach. If you're in the back or you're just walking in, you're like, man, Jim really let himself go over the holidays. It's not, I'm Zach. I'm the campus pastor here. And yeah. So normally I come up here and I talk about football or make jokes about Chili's or whatever that might look like. But today I get to share with you guys a couple things that God's been up to in my life, and I'm super excited for that. I have a note to myself here. I've been told I talk too fast, so I'm gonna try to slow myself down just a little bit today. So I'm glad you're here. Welcome online as well. Hi, Mom. How you doing? And wherever you are in the world, we're glad you're here with us today too. I want to acclimate you guys to who I am a little bit as I tell some stories today. I'm married to Josie. We celebrated our 16th anniversary Friday night. She's wonderful, and I'm lucky to have her. I don't know if she feels the same, but it's been an awesome 16 years. We have 3 kids, and these are my kids. I'm going to talk about them in a minute. That's Emmy on the left, Smith in the middle, and Zane on the right, and they're super cute. I never knew you could love a human being like I love these kids, and they also drive me nuts, right? Yeah. So that's my family. We have a really great life, a really imperfect but great life, and I love every minute of it. My job here at Flatirons, I got here 8 years ago, and I was the middle school pastor. I did youth ministry about 20 years between 3 or 4 different churches, and I love youth ministry, but I transitioned into being a campus pastor down in Denver about 3.5 years ago, and I've been here in Lafayette for just over a year, and here's why. We used to have just this campus, so if you called Flatirons home, you came to Lafayette, and this was your church, and then we opened a couple more, and now this year we're gonna open our 6th campus, and we have this awesome online presence, and so about a year ago they decided we really need to have some structures in place at Lafayette to help us function like some of the other campuses. So I came here about then, and really my primary job is I work with our staff, and we have the best staff on the planet right here in Lafayette. I really mean that. They're the best in the world. So yeah, so it's my pleasure every single day to get to work with them. Another thing I do a lot of weddings, and I started doing funerals a couple years ago. And this last year, I talked about this at Christmas if you're here, but I think I did about 15 funerals this last year. And I used to be terrified of doing those because obviously they're sad and they're difficult. But here's what I want you guys to hear about funerals real quick. I've been changed and I've grown so much through those. Your families, it's you guys. And even in some of these services, I can look out and see some of your faces. Your lost loved ones, the people that they were and what they meant to you, the way that you all deal with grief and the way that you, with grace, walk through that has changed really the way that I look at the world. I have a different appreciation, a different understanding of what Jesus was talking about when he looked at his followers right in the eye and he said to them, "You are the light of the world. So let your light shine before men that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven." Because that's what funerals really are. They're a celebration of people who did that really well, and I'm lucky. So today, like Jim said, I'm bridging 2 series. So I'm taking us from one place and getting us ready for another. If you've been here over the last several months, Jim and Ben have been teaching us through something real specific. And I think they've done a really amazing job of taking us to this thing called the Sermon on the Mount. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically just one of the most famous things that Jesus ever did. It's just a talk that he gave one day. He was walking with his followers. He climbed up the side of a mountain, and he just started talking. And it maybe take you 5-7 minutes to read the whole thing. It starts in Matthew 5. But in that 5 to 7 minutes, it's just super, super rich. And so what Jim and Ben have been doing, they've been talking about the words Jesus used in the original language. They've been talking about the crowd that he was talking to and how they would have understood what he was saying that day. And it changes the meaning for us. It makes us rethink exactly what we thought we knew when we just read the words. This new meaning's opened up to us, and it's been really, really amazing over the last several months. Like Jim said on the video, next week he's kicking off this thing that we call, affectionately around here, we call a Man Series. And if you've been around for that, if you're new, I want to tell you a little bit about what that is, but if you've been around for that, you know that it can be a really powerful thing. It's also a super challenging thing. Jim looks right at us men and he challenges us, and it can seem threatening. Like, I'm gonna tell you guys the truth, for me personally, they're not putting me on the cover of the brochure of how to be a man, right? Like, I don't hunt, I don't fish, I love sports, but it's not like I'm good at them. I didn't want Jim to know this, but maybe he'll watch a different service. I shot a gun one time in my life and it hit me in the face and I never did it again. So that's the kind of man you're looking at today. But here's the truth. I want to be a good husband, I want to be a good father, and I have to rethink how I do those things all the time. And so over the next 6 weeks, as Jim is challenging us as men, I want you guys to know this too. That's not the expense of women, and I want you to really hear that. And there's a couple things I want to say around that. The first one is this: when I'm not living up to the way that God challenges me as a man and the things he says I'm supposed to do, that falls on my wife first and my kids next, and then everybody else after that. And so the next 6 weeks, I think that we can all agree that it's worth the time for us to challenge men to say, you need to be the kind of man that your family needs. And if you're a single man or a single woman, it's still true. Because our culture is full of men that are missing the mark, and all of us are paying the price, but it starts with you guys. And the last thing I want to say about this is that biblical principles aren't just for men or just for women. These principles are going to be good for everybody. And so I just want to challenge all of us as we walk in here the next 6 weeks to be open to being challenged, because it's going to be really, really good. Cool? So the reason we're calling this Rethink is this. I got together with all the campus pastors. I don't know if you guys caught the nuance in Jim's thing. He accidentally called me young, and I appreciate that. I am 40. I'm a man, okay? But the rest of the campus pastors are young, and they're handsome, and I don't like you guys. So when you watch this back, no. But we got together and we just started talking about the stuff that we've learned through this series, these series on the Sermon on the Mount, the stuff that made us stop and think, hey, I used to look at it like this, but now I'm understanding it like that. And we were just naming some of those things and talking about it. The stuff that makes us reevaluate the way that our lives are going, or the stuff that we really believe about life. And Jim asked me this. He said, what impacts you from the Sermon on the Mount, and where did it come from upstream in your life? And here's what he meant by that. What's the origin of whatever it is that catches your attention from Jesus' words? And honestly, I was a little freaked out and not totally happy, because I already knew as soon as we started talking that way what I was going to have to talk about. And that's when Jesus talks about anger. And there's a lot of reasons for that, so I want to pack a few of those for you this morning. A little bit of background. I've always had a little bit of a short fuse, and I still kind of do. As a kid, I grew up in San Diego, California. I had a guy last night tell me that he hates people from California, but maybe he might like me, so sorry about that. But whatever stereotype you have of people from San Diego or from California, I fit most of them, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on the one. But the one that I really fit is I'm pretty laid back. Like, most of the time, I can sit around, I can talk about skateboarding or talk about baseball or whatever that might be, and I'm pretty easy to get along with most of the time. I go with the flow. If there's something going on, maybe I disagree with it, but I'm just going to do it anyway because it's okay. It'll be cool. It's going to be all right. But eventually, I hit a breaking point, and eventually, something sparks that fuse and makes it pop. As a kid, I got into a lot of trouble in school, and it was the kind of trouble, like, I wasn't a hothead kid starting fights. I was the kind of kid, and if you've been around here for a little bit, this won't surprise you, I like to interrupt the teacher and tell a joke, right? I like to get the class laughing. I like to, do whatever it was that could get people to pay attention to me for a minute. And it's the kind of thing, like the stereotype where the teacher says, you can have 2 minutes at the end of class if you'll just shut up right now, right? I was that kind of kid. And one of my highlights was 7th grade. I got our entire class sent to the principal's office. We all had to line up on the wall, and it was a huge victory. I really enjoyed that. And this also won't surprise you if you know me, but when I'm passionate about something, I can get my mouth going, and I can start talking a lot of trash, and I did that a lot as a kid as well. See, I get my friends and I into trouble when we were out skateboarding. We get kicked out of a place by, either a police officer or rent-a-cop, and I made sure that they heard from me how I felt about that, right? And we get in more trouble. My favorite thing to do, and this will give you a little bit of an idea what kind of kid I was, is spoiler alert, I didn't go to church very much, is I would go up and I would start fights between people, and then I'd walk away and just watch how they went. And I enjoyed it a lot. It was fun. I'm gonna be honest with you. That's the kind of kid I was. And some of my earliest memories from elementary school, middle school, were just fights or arguments that I started, whether they were verbal or physical, whatever that looked like, but they all came from the same root, which was this temper that I had. As I grew up, I got a little bit older. I have two sisters. They probably have horrific stories that I don't want to hear about my temper. But as I grew up, I went to college up in Greeley, and as an 18-year-old freshman, I discovered who Jesus really was. It came out of nowhere. I didn't expect it. I honestly didn't want it. And it's a different story for a different time. But as I discovered Jesus, what didn't happen was I didn't wake up the next day and have it all figured out. I woke up the next day and I made some of the worst mistakes I ever made. And I spent a couple months trying to figure out what it looks like to actually follow after Jesus, to actually understand him, and to actually give my life to him. And here's what I finally came to understand after months of struggling through it and trying to figure out what it looks like to follow him. I understood that my life didn't have to look the way it did right then all the time. It didn't have to be like that. It didn't have to be so hard. I say this about my anger and my temper is that it's morphed over time. And I really do believe that these days I can deal with a lot more. But the breaking point eventually does come when I'm festering or something's really going. And the fuse is just as short, but I think the right metaphor is maybe it's just a little harder to light it these days. The truth of it is this, though. My family are the ones who pay the price for it. They're the ones that get the brunt of it. Because if I'm holding in something from work that I'm upset about, I don't march into Jim's office and yell at him because I'm not dumb. You guys have seen Jim? I also am an adult who wants to keep my job, and so I have to figure out healthy ways to try to do that. But here's what actually happens to me. I take any of that kind of stuff and I stuff it down. I push it away. I take it home with me, and eventually I let something dumb like my kids arguing over Monopoly or asking for extra screen time and not understanding why I won't give it to them make me so mad and I lose my mind. Or here's a pet peeve. People who don't use their turn signals. And sometimes it's just mildly annoying, and then there's days where it makes me so angry. Why do you do that? Why do people do that? Where I find myself yelling at the dashboard in an uncontrollable fit of anger, and I don't know what just happened. I really honestly always pick really bad times for it, and it's usually in public. And I don't know if anybody can relate to that. Sometimes it's around sports. When I was younger, I played a lot of pickup basketball. I got kicked out of at least one intramural league at UNC. If you're up in Greeley, look for my picture in the post office. I don't know what happened that day. When I was a youth pastor, I played basketball with a bunch of my students down in Monument. I got kicked out of the YMCA, and it was a really terrible day. Tell that story sometime. But a lot of it is around parenting, when I'm just at the end of my rope. So like last year, I took my kids to a Rockies game. My team was in town. I've brainwashed my kids effectively, and they cheer for the same team I do. And we were so excited because we were going to walk into Coors Field and have this awesome night. It's just the four of us. It's going to be a good time. So we're walking from the car to the gate, and any parent in here knows this story. The kids start fighting, just picking at each other, little by little. And you know, it's the kind of stuff that drives you crazy, but you're just like, why do you have to do this? And so I kept giving them the parent idle threat. So even if you're not a parent, you got these as a kid, where it's like, hey, we can leave now. I don't mind. We can go home. It's okay. Like, we can just go ahead and get in the car. You guys can have McDonald's on the way home and go to bed. All that kind of stuff, right? We finally get to the gate, and I think we've made it. And I hear one of my kids yell, "Don't step on my foot, you jerk." And then a brawl ensues, right? Like the kind that you'd pull your car over to watch brawl in front of Coors Field. And I look at them, I'm going, "What's wrong with you guys?" And the kid, I won't say which one, but she said, she says, "He always steps on my foot. He's just trying to make me mad," which is a ludicrous statement. And so my response, instead of just diffusing the situation, was I threw my arms up, and in front of the entire Coors Field security staff and all the ticket takers, I yell, "Well, it looks like the mission's accomplished, doesn't it? Because now you're being a jerk." And I lost my mind. I run a little red anyway. I was probably purple. So terrible situation. We collected ourselves, tears were shed, we decided we were gonna make the game work, and we turn around, I hand my tickets over, and the ticket taker says, "Well, hi, Pastor Zach." And that's a true story, sadly. But what's even worse than that in those situations is at home, when I can turn minor disagreements into cold shoulders or slam doors or sleeping on the couch because it's easier than confronting whatever it is that I'm compensating for. Yeah, I'm being vulnerable here because I really believe this, whether it's anger for you or something else, we all have versions of this, things that trip us up over and over again, and we're trying to figure out what to do with them. Because the truth is, it's not that often that I go that crazy. I'm not like this crazy hothead that everybody should, that we should lock up right now. It's not that often, but it's often enough, and the root of it is always close enough to my heart that when I heard Jim teach this a few months back from Matthew, it's Jesus speaking in Matthew 5:22, he says this, "But I say to you, that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says you fool will be liable to the hell of fire. It makes me stop and take notice. The hell of fire is not a phrase that I want to be associated with. It's rough. But here's the truth about anger in my life, and I think a lot of you can relate to this. It's an automatic response to whatever's going on in my heart. See, I've programmed myself to stuff things down that are bothering me, and here's the lie I tell myself. I tell myself that when I stuff it, I'm dealing with it. Or I tell myself that I'm being the better person or the bigger person or whatever that might look like, and instead of just getting angry and dealing with it right there, I stuff it down and everything's cool. What actually happens is this: it takes root in my heart, in my life, and it starts to grow. It just rests in this place where I can add resentment to it, where I can tell a story. I can make up a story about what actually happened, whether it's something at work or with a friend or another car in traffic or for some reason a barista. I don't know what's wrong with me. Whatever that happens, where that story starts to fester and resentment grows and grows and grows. See, if you pay attention, what Jesus is saying in those few sentences is that he's naming 3 kinds of specific anger that we deal with. And I don't know about you, but I deal with all 3 of these. He says brooding anger, which is deep, dark, and in the soul. It's the kind of anger that's just sitting there. We don't maybe know where it came from, but it continues to be there. And at any given moment, it might show up. Anger that keeps a record, and anger that seeks revenge. All 3 of these are the kind of anger that when they're together, it's a really bad recipe for disaster, but alone, they're bad enough. And I struggle with all 3. Here's what I believe about the day and an age that we live in. I think we live in an angry time. And you can see it from the cars around you at any given red light. I've seen a couple amazing fistfights on the side of the road just driving around town. You can see it when you flip on the TV and you go to CNN or Fox News and there's people screaming at each other and I don't even know what they're talking about, and everywhere in between. It's all around us. And here's what I do. I try to fool myself or justify things by saying that I carry righteous anger. You know, the kind of anger that Jesus showed, because we know that Jesus got angry and that Jesus showed anger, but he did it over things that God said were injustices. Things that needed to be looked at. See, Jesus didn't walk into the temple and turn over tables because somebody cut him off on their donkey without using the blinker, right? That's not what he did. So like Jesus did, I should reserve my anger for things like injustice because there's things that really bother me. I see families in here that deal with losing people to the opioid crisis, or I meet families all the time that lost their home under conditions that seem unfair. There's people suffering in any number of ways: sex trafficking, racism, terrorism, stuff that really, really does bother me. But the truth is that most of the time, those aren't the things that get me fired up. My own wants and desires do. My own selfishness. That stuffed down anger, the monster that's grown into, that wants to win, usually at least makes its presence known. And honestly, this is really what it is. Pure and simple, it's the struggle between the person that I want to be through Jesus and the person that my sinful self wants to hold on to. And that's the battle I'm in every day. I don't know what faith tradition you come from. Like, I grew up with very little faith tradition. And so I'd hear about people named Paul. Maybe you've heard of the Apostle Paul if you grew up in certain kinds of churches. But Paul is this man who wrote most of the New Testament. And so the second half of the Bible that starts with the stories of Jesus and goes through the end of it, Paul wrote a lot of that. And they're usually letters to churches. And Paul's the man in the Bible that next to Jesus addresses these kind of heart conditions the most. In one of his letters, he wrote a letter to a young church in a city called Galatia, and the church was struggling to find unity between 2 really different groups of people who were living completely separate lives until the message of Jesus landed in their city and they became a church. These people were different racially, culturally, religiously, and politically. And then this message that Jesus is here and he's alive and he wants something different for your life comes in, and they had to figure out how to make life work. So Paul's goal was this. He wrote this letter in an effort to try to spur them towards understanding and trusting that the Spirit of God that resided in each one of them was all that really mattered. That any obstacle they faced could be overcome through the Holy Spirit and all the things that it actually produces in the heart of a believer. So Paul wrote this letter and he says this, and he says, now the works of the flesh are evident, is the way that he starts it. And really what he's saying this, a paraphrase that I like puts it like this: it's obvious what kind of life develops out of trying to get your own way all the time. When you pay attention only to the thing that the automatic responses to the things that you want, the selfish desires that come up, it's obvious what you're going to get. And Paul calls it out, and he basically just says this: we know what we're going to get when we chase after what our flesh wants. We're trying to get our own way. We're trying to look out for number one and not really care what happens to anyone else. And I don't think that most of us necessarily wish harm to at least most other people, but we take care of business first. We look out for number one. And whatever happens to other people, it happens. That's what happens when our flesh is winning, when our desires are out of control. So Paul starts with that. He just drops that down, and he starts this list. And it's a list that's brutal. When we read through it here together in a second, it's brutal because for one thing, I see myself on it multiple times, but for two, Paul's talking to a really specific group of people, and it's not those kind of people, or people who have no idea who Jesus is and aren't trying to live their life in any kind of way according to it. He's talking to people who say, I follow Jesus. He's talking to Christians. And he says, listen, followers of Jesus, when you let your flesh lead you, here's what you get, and you know you're going to get it, but you do it anyways. And I'm not here to point a finger because I'm pointing at myself. When I read this list, I see me first, but I really do think that every single one of us makes the list. So I'm going to read this brutal list, and I want you to see if anything strikes a chord with you. So Paul says this. He says, it's obvious what kind of life develops out of trying to get your own way all the time. Repetitive, loveless, cheap sex. A stinking accumulation of mental and emotional garbage. Frenzied and joyless grabs for happiness. Trinket or toy gods, basically a God you could control. Magic show of religion, which means, God, show me something amazing and I don't want anything else. Paranoid loneliness. Cutthroat competition. All-consuming yet never satisfied wants. A brutal temper. An impotence to love or be loved. Divided homes and divided lives. Small-minded and lopsided pursuits. The vicious habit of depersonalizing everyone into a rival. Uncontrolled and uncontrollable addictions. Ugly parodies of community. And if all of that's not bad enough, he says, I could keep going, right? And that's a lot of stuff on there. It's heavy stuff. And for me personally, the list just pops over and over again with things that are at least a little bit true for me. See, when we talk about the origins of things in my life that Paul would call a brutal temper that causes that, I can confidently say this. My desire to do things my own way, my desire to control the outcomes of my life continuously leads me back to that same stuffed anger that results in mental and emotional garbage, or joyless grabs at happiness, or depersonalizing people, even people that I really, really like, into my rivals. And honestly, probably a bunch more on that list if I'm honest. And the truth is, like I said, nobody's immune to the list. Every single one of us is on it. Maybe it's anger for you, or maybe it's something else, but probably something popped for you when you saw that list. But here's the truth. Even though we're on it, the other side of that truth is this. It doesn't have to be the story of our lives. It doesn't have to be the cycle that we live in where we think we have it figured out and then it comes back. Jim was talking about God Behind Bars a few minutes ago. About 3 weeks ago, a group of us went out to Las Vegas to see what they do. And we got to spend an evening with them at one of their events, and it was a really amazing night. But the church that hosted it in Las Vegas is a really amazing church. When you walk in the front doors, there's a giant mural that has a saying that I've always loved, and it just says really big when you walk in, it's okay not to be okay. And if that describes you in your life and you go, man, that just rings for me too. And I just say, welcome to Flatirons, because this is a safe place for you, no matter where you are in life, to be who you really are. And to ask Jesus to work on you, to come into that. Because really, I believe that's what this church is all about. From Jim all the way to the person who walked in here for the first time today and has no idea what's going on. This is a church full of people like us who say, I don't have it all figured out, but I know with Jesus, I might get there. But we run all this through this filter of rethinking how we want to live. This phrase, it's okay not to be okay. When I really rethink that phrase, here's what I keep thinking. I do believe it's true. It's okay not to be okay. But what's not okay is never trying to figure it out. Never trying to get past it, or never trying to ask the hard questions about what it would take to get there. So I have a bunch of questions. I'm going to just start asking them. The first one is this. How do you get okay? Especially when life's really hard, it's out of control, and stuff just keeps happening. I'm going to start here. For me, instead of trying to control outcomes, instead of trying to figure out how to be a better person, for instance, or how to keep rules that would lead me away from behaviors that are sinful, instead of focusing on stuff like that, my focus needs to be on figuring out what kind of life Jesus really offers as an alternative. In order to do that, I really believe it requires spending time with him. And so for me personally, here's the truth I have to face. My anger, my resentment, my fear, it's all rooted in some things that I can control and some things that I can't. In your situation, whether it's anger or something else that you're holding in your head is the thing for you, your situations have uncontrollable and controllable parts as well. I believe this. I believe that the pace of the lives that we all lead in this culture, in this day and age, leave us tired and worn out and maybe even burned out. We face pressures at work or at school, in relationships, in our culture and society that don't have easy answers or pretty bows to tie on them. And really, I believe this. In 2019, I believe that we live in a pressure cooker as a society. And here's what I mean by that. We have this news cycle that won't let us breathe. As every bad story possible just refreshes itself and stresses us out in some new way or shape or form. Then we choose sides on issues and we make those who disagree with us two-dimensional rivals or enemies. And the availability of information that we have gets us overload, and we're constantly just thinking and weighed down by all of it. Then we add in social media that makes us feel like we're never going to do anything as good as anyone else, right? Or that we're never going to have it figured out. And then there's also this, it sucks away all of our free time. There's this screen time app, and right before I came up here at 9 o'clock, the screen time app pinged and told me how many hours I averaged on my screen on my phone last week, and it's terrifying, right? And I get that report. I don't know if anybody else does, and it makes me just want to throw the thing away. But what I actually do is I put it down for about 30 seconds, and I pick it back up and do it again, right? If you're a parent in here, you know how hard that is. Parenting every single day is hard. And in general, I'd say that the parent who spends more time with the kids feels that in ways that those of us on the other side never can know. Like, usually that's moms. I know it's some dads, and dads, if this is you, include yourself in this, but I want to say moms, women in this room, I know and I recognize it. I'm in awe of your ability to juggle all that you keep track of, all the jobs you do, the things that you do for our kids, the way that you make our households run, and you're just tired, but I recognize it. I'm in awe of your ability to juggle that because you're tired in a way that I can never understand. But for all of us, we're tired. We're just tired people, and we need help. So the question is this: what does it mean to spend time with Jesus? Because I don't know about you guys, but to me, especially when I first started getting to know Jesus a little bit, that just sounded strange. Like I pictured Luke with like a hologram Yoda learning lessons in the woods or whatever that is. Or, you know, the Karate Kid with his chopsticks killing flies. It just seems like when I can't see something, how am I supposed to spend time with him? So a few chapters after that Sermon on the Mount, it starts in Matthew 5 and runs for a little bit, Jesus extends this invitation that I think is stunning, and I think it's the answer to what we're looking for. So he sits his followers down, and he tells them, guys, God has entrusted me with all things. All things. And there's no root word in the original language that takes you to some other alternate meaning. Jesus is looking at them and saying, every single thing, the things you want me to know, the things you don't, the things that you're happy about and the things that you aren't, God has given me all of that. All of it's mine. And he looks at them and says, the only way for you to ever know God is to know me, Jesus. And that got him killed. And maybe that just sounds familiar or something that makes sense to us in this day and age, but that got Jesus killed. Because the truth is that we don't want that to be the answer because it seems at the same time too easy and too daunting. But I want you to think about it in this context today. The only way to get to know God is to know Jesus. The only way for me to deal with my anger that debilitates me is to know God, is to know Jesus. It's not through good deeds. It's not through keeping rules. It's not through alternate philosophies or some secret. It's not through hard work. It's not through having the right politics or anything else. It's only Jesus. And the truth is this: we can't ever do enough. We can't earn it, but we keep on trying because we're wired that way. And I know for me personally, I keep jumping on that hamster wheel that tells me if I run fast enough or hard enough or do the right things, that maybe I'll figure it out. But I just keep running and getting more and more tired. But Jesus, he couldn't be any more clear, and he proclaims this thing next that really gets to the heart of it. He looks at his followers a few chapters before, and I read it at the beginning today. He looks at them and he says to them, and I really believe this, that through space and time, that Jesus is looking right at us who call ourselves followers of him. And he says this: you are the light of the world, which means this: you carry my light with you. So when you experience darkness, that light wins. When you come up against problems, when you have anger that makes your life change, when you have whatever it is that you're dealing with, my light wins. And then he sees us in our tired, weary, broken souls, and he invites us into his life. And he says this: he looks at them and he says, are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you burned out on religion, which really just means keeping rules? Jesus says, come to me. Get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Freely and lightly. So that's the next question I have. So what's it mean to go to Jesus? What's it mean to be with him? Because here's what it's not. It's not some religious box checking of reading the right Bible verses in the right order at the right time of day, or some spiritual mumbo jumbo, or some code word, or the perfect prayer that would just solve everything. Here's what I think it is. I don't think it's as much of a mystery as we make it sometimes. Here's what Jesus invites us into. He invites us to surrender where we wish to control. We give up and we get so much back. He invites us to peace, to a real rest. When we're tempted to rest by being angry or lustful or drinking excessively or whatever that thing is for us, he says, come to me and take a real rest and find peace. And instead of trying to swim against the current of this world alone, Jesus says it's the unforced rhythms of grace. It's an invitation to seeking mercy and grace in place of those automatic responses that we programmed into our lives. And Jim told me this, and I think he's right. He said, only each one of us can really know what that means for us. But here's what I believe. I believe the first step is just trying. It's practicing. It's asking God into your chaos. It's asking God into the victories that you have, big or small. It's looking at him saying, you told me that all things are yours, and I'm telling you now that all my life is yours. The things I want you to know, the things I don't want you to know, the things I'm hiding, the things that I think nobody can ever see. And I believe this, when we are able to do that and tell him that and confidently do that, for me personally, it resets my auto responses. Instead of going back to the same well over and over again, I'm able to look to something new. Or go back to what Paul taught us in this book called Galatians. It's in Galatians 5 if you want to look at it later. He offers us an alternative to every single thing that our default practices. So everything on that first list has an antidote. Because that first list is this. It's full of things that we struggle with and I fear that I'm never going to overcome. But we look at Jesus and he's running ahead of us. He has this unforced rhythm of grace, this pace that he's keeping. And he says, if you can just follow me in my steps and let the Spirit of God lead you instead of your own flesh, he says there's a second list. So he says this, he says, all that first list, all that horrible stuff being said, he said, but the fruit of the Spirit, or the result of following after the Holy Spirit instead of trying to get our own way all the time, is this. It's love, it's joy, it's peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And he says this. He says, those who belong to Jesus, who have said, take all of it, can defeat sin by Jesus' death and Jesus' resurrection, and we can replace the desires and actions of that first list with the second one. And it says this, it says, since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. Let us follow the unforced rhythms of grace that show us the way. And at the end of the day, here's what's true. Well, I still believe it's okay not to be okay, and this is the church for anybody in that spot. As a people that are light in a dark world, as a people who are beacons of hope in an angry and divided world, we can chase after the traits on that second list instead of the first. Here's what I want to promise you here in Lafayette. If you find yourself lost or desperate or isolated, welcome to Flatirons, because me too. If you can't find control, welcome. If you keep trying, you're on that hamster wheel and it's spinning, but it just seems too hard, you're in the right place. Because this church and this campus, we have a place for you, and we get it, because that's what we're going through every single day as well. Here's what I want to do. I just want to practice today. I want to practice what it looks like to say all things are his, and for me to take my anger and hand it to him and say, do something with it. And so if you thought of something during this that's that thing for you, I would love for you just to grab that in your brain right now, because to experience the kind of grace that can revolutionize your life, it starts with one thing. It's letting yourself off the mat. It's letting yourself out of this cycle that says that you're bad and you're never going to get it right. So I want you to think of your own brand of doubt that anything can be different. All the I'm never going to be good enough, and all the why even tries, and all the Jesus wouldn't even understand. And just let Jesus have that, even if it's just for a moment. Just invite him to take it. And like I said, this is practice. So maybe you're going to say, well, nothing happened, I did that. And that's okay, because sometimes nothing happens when you practice, right? But when you get reps in and you try it again and again, things change. When you give it to Jesus and say, you can have it, eventually something does change. So let's try that. Jesus, you can have this. It's yours. Do something with it. How do I follow the unforced rhythm of grace and follow in your steps? And then I'm going to ask you one other thing. From there, seek help. So surround yourself with people that make you remember who you want to be, not people that drag you back down to the other place. And I want to leave you with 5 steps that are just super practical that you can leave with here today. The first one is this. We have something here every single Friday night called Shift. And if you've never been to that, Shift is run by one of my heroes. Her name's Lisa. She's just fantastic. And she has a team that has this place every Friday night for anybody in any struggle. And Lisa was telling me, she said, people associate Shift with just chemical dependence, and that's definitely part of it. But she said it's like 10%. Shift is for any person with anything going on in life. It's every Friday night, so check that out. Second one is this. Maybe you're a student, middle school or high school. Our middle school program is meeting right now on the other side of the building, and it's incredible. Our high school program meets on Tuesday nights. And maybe you're a student, you go, I wish my life looked different. I know I want something better, and I just really don't know how to get there. And I would tell you, you need to go show up on Tuesday night if you're a high school student. Lindsay and her team have a place that is built exactly for acceptance and a space you need to figure out what it is that Jesus wants for you. The third one is this. My small group has saved my life, and it does all of that for me. And I know Jim talked about this. Like 5,000 of you signed up for a small group, which is incredible. I keep hearing amazing stories out of those groups. And so if you had a really good experience, maybe maybe you wouldn't even go as far to say my life changed, but I know a lot of you would. But if you just had a really good experience, I would love for you, even on your way out the doors today, to tell somebody that and encourage them to try one out. And I will say this, if you had a really bad experience, because I've heard a few of those stories too, try again. It wasn't you, it was them, right? Try again, because every single one of us has a place that we can find. The fourth one's this, volunteer. We have needs all over this building. We have needs every week in facilities. We have needs in guest services with Mick and her incredible team. But I have 2 real specific ones. Our kids ministry always needs help. Next Saturday night at the 6 o'clock service, they have a training in our school space right over here you can just show up to. And I have one other one. Our student ministry, middle school and high school, needs men. They have an awesome group of volunteers, a really cool culture, but they're short on men. And a lot of those students come from broken homes or they never even knew their dad. A lot of those students are just waiting for the man who's going to come into their life and be a surrogate leader in their life to tell them this is what life can look like. And so if you're interested in that, you can ask me out there in the lobby or you can jump on our website and follow some steps towards emailing them. But they need men to step up in that program. And the last thing I have is this, because some of us dragged ourselves in here today. Maybe we didn't even want to come. And some of us, it's our first time or maybe even your 100th time, and you go, I'm not ready for any of that. I just need to keep hearing stuff that helps me understand and process, and that's okay. My last one is this, show up next week. This Man series is going to start, but it's for all of us. It's a challenge to every single one of us to be the people that God says we can be. Not through trying harder, not through keeping the right rules, but by learning the unforced rhythms of grace that help us get there. And if nothing else, I want to leave you with this. Jesus invites us into his way. He sat down and through space and time, he looked us in the eyes and he says, you are invited into this. A restful, patient way. A grace that has a rhythm to it, and over time, the beat makes sense. And you start to step to it and understand it. And you're able to step into that grace. And this is what it does for us. The promise is this. It makes us loving, joyful, peaceful, patient, kind, faithful, gentle people who exhibit self-control, and it changes everything. So we're gonna sing another song together. If you guys wanna stand up, I'm gonna pray for us. I love being at this campus, and I love you guys for being gracious and kind human beings, so thank you so much. All right, let's pray. God, thank you so much this morning that you are the kind of God who gave us Jesus, who invites us into this way, that looks at our life, God, and all the stuff that I have on that list. But God, a brutal temper, and looks at me and says, it doesn't have to be like this. Come to me and learn this unforced rhythm of grace and step into the steps I took and figure out a better way to do it. So God, I pray for me and for all my friends here today, both in the room and online, God, that wherever we sit and whatever we're walking through and whatever it is that we know we need from you, that this morning as we seek to take the stuff off that first list and replace it with being the kind of people you say we can be, loving, joyful, peaceful, people that exhibit self-control. God, gentle people who just want to live and be a little bit more like Jesus. I pray that this morning, whatever obstacle we have to clear, to be able to practice this idea that we can let you have it and ask you to teach us what it looks like to walk in unforced rhythms of grace, that Jesus would show up in a way that we know he can and will, and that we'd allow him to do that. Thank you for Jesus, and we pray this in his name. Amen.
How great the chasm that lay between us, how high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven, spoke your name into the night. Then through the darkness, your loving kindness tore through the shadows of my soul. The work is finished, the end is written. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Who could imagine so great a mercy? What heart could fathom such boundless grace? The God of ages stepped down from glory to wear my sin and bear my shame. The cross has spoken, I am forgiven. The King of Kings calls me his own. Beautiful Savior, I'm yours forever. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope.
Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe.
Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me.
prayer for anything going on in your life, there's going to be some good people up here at the front of the stage. I'd love to pray for you. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.